all the things. And there are now.
We're live. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Okay. Senator Purchase, you want to have a seat at the head of the table? We do have a quorum. Senator Hinsdale, Rob Hinsdale is here. Tell us about the amendment that's in the calendar, if you don't mind.
So my amendment, who I did get, Pearson said he would sign on to it, so I think his name is on there as well, is two instances of amendment. The first is just to have better language other than climate sensitive. The bill has that. This is in section 9 of the bill that last was in the calendar, where this is the partnership that the VHCB is creating. And it had several things that the partnership would work on, kind of goals. And one talked about climate sensitive smart growth development. And there was some confusion. I talked to people, did that mean like wetlands, or did that mean, energy, climate that way? So talking to folks seemed like some more clarity on that would be welcome. So it takes strikes out climate sensitive, puts in that reduces greenhouse gas emissions.
We've heard from you and I both have heard from VHCP that they're fine. Because this, as you know, is also just an enabling section of VHCP wants to set up a partnership with other groups that can use some of their money to do that. Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a friendly clarification, I feel. I mean,
Yeah.
that's our goal. So.
And I mean, the overall goal with this amendment is just to continue to raise our efforts to reduce fossil fuels and reduce greenhouse gas emissions wherever we can. It's definitely a goal. It seems like that we all share, but sometimes we forget little opportunities to raise that up where we can. So that's my effort here. One of the main reasons I wanted to be a senator is to work on this stuff. So this is my attempt at some small efforts that I consider small efforts, just to make sure they're highlighted. And the second instance of amendment is in section 11. This is with the municipal bylaw grants.
Right.
I just had my amendment from you, not the whole bill, unfortunately.
You're adding.
So in that municipal grants section, section 11, it appropriates that other money, that's 600,000 or whatever, and then it has the 9 items.
Right. And you're adding a 10.
Adding a 10. So the amendment shows 8, 9, 10, and Ellen Tchaikovsky tells me that's just because of punctuation. She had to include 8 and 9 to add 10. But really the amendment is just 10, which says update the bylaws to comply with its municipal energy plan.
Yeah.
And the reason that I wanted to add that in there is been involved in the past several years. This legislature, General Assembly, has really encouraged towns to strengthen the energy part of their town plans. We've given money to the Department of Public Service to provide assistance. We've given money to Vermont League of Cities and Towns, the regional commissions to support town energy planning. And so I just thought if town was going to be working on their bylaws, there's an opportunity just like, hey, let's look at our energy plan. That's probably been updated in the last 4 years, just to make sure there isn't any conflict. I'm not expecting a lot. It's just adding that as something that they're paying attention to when they're writing their bylaws. And so I thought we should just highlight that for them. It's like, hey, we're giving you money to redo your bylaws. Make sure you look at your energy plan just to make sure if there's a conflict that's settled.
Well, one would hope they would look at all the updates in their planning commission, but thank you for pointing this out. And I feel a little mea culpa that we didn't, in some ways, remember to include that in this and in the other language, which is, of course, we strive for all new housing and all new renovation to be energy efficient. And in fact, the VHIP program is designed, we added weatherization as a key piece to it. So I think, for me, I'm very grateful that you're doing this. I wish you'd done it sooner, but it's better.
Right. Well, as soon as I saw it in the notice calendar, I did.
Yeah. No, I
sort of bring it
wish
up.
we had already done this.
I'm still a little unclear as to whether these 9 or 10 criteria are goals or requirements to get the grant.
It says that.
It says shall,
It
I'm
says
pretty
they
sure.
shall do this to get the grant. At the, on page.
Yeah, but if you look at these things, it also seems to read that these are the things they're supposed to do with the grant money.
Yeah, a lot of them are kind of goalie, kind of shall, like you shall think about it kind of thing. And I kind of put the bylaws complying with the energy plan in that same area, like, it's just a reminder to them to look at it. I don't think there was ever, I can't imagine where they would not want them to be in alignment, because they've written both of them.
Okay, well, we'll hear from Chris. You know, the concern that I have at this late time is that this is not meant to be an enforcement bill to make sure all bylaws are in compliance with everything. It's to try and move the bylaws in the direction of creating greater housing. Not that, you know, it just one, I think I asked this question before. So these energy plans, is there a legal requirement right now that the bylaws be in conformance with the energy plan?
Not that I'm aware of.
And this would basically say you would have to be in conformance with the energy plan to get any extra money. State.
If you get this grant to redo your bylaws, when you redo your bylaws, look at your energy.
Okay, so we'll hear from.
And it's not the energy plan, it doesn't have to be compliant with the state energy plan, just that municipality.
the town center.
I understand.
And I think actually I think it makes total sense.
The stakeholders brought us this language, and it was in, I think the language probably hasn't changed much from what we passed last year. So just.
Yeah, no, but I think it's a good one. I mean, this is absolutely parallels our work with the climate action plan. And, you know, this is the kind of thing we should be embedding in all our legislation is, and we need to just remember to have our antenna up on this everywhere.
That would be my argument.
Do you have a copy? Do we have a copy of,
It's in the calendar.
It's in the calendar,
right, but does Scott, do you have a copy of the event?
but the amendment, if I have 2 copies, I can give you one.
Did you email it to us?
Thank you, Senator.
Oh,
Maybe
okay.
Like,
4.
we'll-
Thank you,
we'll-
Andy.
We'll hear from Chris and we'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you.
Is Chris here?
No, by trying to reach him to give him.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Yes.
So, our next issue is we're back to 703, correct? And who do we have?
This is Tiffany Walker. She's from CCB.
Oh,
So sorry, what, before we leave 226?
Right.
What are we doing with Alice's?
We have Scott working on it.
Got it.
He's trying to just track Alice down, see if she still has a problem. Got a very good.
We got an answer from Ellen, right? Or
I've
from,
got a good memo from Mike O'Grady. There's
Right.
No need to change the language.
got it. Great.
I assume Alice would be okay. So, but we need to find that out.
Great.
Is there any
Thank you.
rule that you can't leave the committee if you need to?
I can leave. The only thing is if this goes down,
Okay. Well, we'll have a couple.
this should be fine.
We'll have a couple of breaks,
Yeah.
okay? I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Tiffany.
Oh, she's up on.
It says Tiffany Walker.
Tiffany, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So if you could introduce yourself and tell us what sections of 703 you are interested in or might help us with, we're all ears.
Sure. I'm Tiffany Walker. I'm the Associate Dean of Workforce at the Community College of Vermont, and I'm seated in Rutland right now. So thank you for having me this morning. I am interested to hear if you have places you would like me to focus on. The section that I think I could start with is section 14, the Vermont Trade Scholarship Program. So the colleges did put forth an idea pretty early on in this bill. And as you know, it's made its way in many different directions. So the pieces here that I think are really important are the closing the gap for people in attainment of an industry credential within their program. So we have a lot of people who are taking these either college level programs, some even non-credit programs, but for the most part, credit bearing programs in apprenticeship or in college associate degrees, certificate programs. And those very frequently have an industry credential that can be attained during their time in the program or immediately after completion. And there are a lot of gaps for people in being able to pay for those credentials, either to sit for the exam or for the certification fee. So this piece in section 14, I believe, is what is going to be addressing that, is this money to VSAC to be able to award people in, this says the trades, thinking kind of widely as you see the list there, it does include healthcare. So not necessarily the traditional idea of just the trades, but also in healthcare and clean energy and things like that. So these gaps, what we've seen with people when we're able to embed these in coursework so people can use financial aid, the attainment of an industry credential is much, much higher if it is separated out and people then have to pay. Coming up with that could be $100, could be $60, could be $150 is often a barrier for people. But it does give them not only a huge boost in the workplace, but also lets the employer know that they have a set of skills that industry has certified. So I think this is an important section here.
What, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
Tiffany, what percent of people at VCC don't complete the apprenticeship or certification programs? How many do you, how big is this problem?
Well, we can't, it's not easy for us to say how many people don't do a credential, because the credential, when it is offered in coursework, it's almost 100%. So if the example that we have used, so there was a document that was given out, and I don't know if you were given this document, it was from the Vermont State Colleges, it's called the Credential Attainment Fund document, and it did outline some data we were able to pull on certified public bookkeepers in our accounting program, and the difference between them attaining the credentials needed, and this is a national credential from the Bookkeeping Association. They had almost 100% attainment if it was embedded in their coursework. So the fee was it could be considered a course fee at that time. When it was decoupled from that, it went down to almost zero. And when we've used the other data that we can use to look at this is the data from the amazing CRF funding that we were able to give to Vermonters to take coursework. And when we asked them what had prevented them in the past, they said funding, that money was the reason why they didn't do it and weren't able to do it. So it's kind of an extrapolation of data on top of data to see, are people not doing this because they just don't have the funding to do it? We do know as well that people drop out of coursework because of textbook fees, because of extra. So anything that's extra, it's another $100, another $150 does make it very difficult for them. So if you do not have that document, please let me know. We can send that.
Yeah, that would be great if you'd send that to Scott or to all of us. That would be great.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chair? In section 14, there's some eligibility criteria as far as scholarships to the program. Is the description of which programs can be recognized in any way potentially limiting to training programs and apprenticeship programs and industry recognized programs in other kinds of activities? In particular, I'm thinking of telecommunications, and I'm also thinking in the limitation about clean energy. Does that preclude training in areas such as boiler maintenance, for example, maintenance and of existing heating systems that, regardless of our efforts toward clean energy, are going to be around for a long time? Should the language be broadened is my question.
And is that question towards me? I thought you said to the chair. I'm sorry.
No, the question is for you, please.
Oh, great. Yeah, I agree with you. Absolutely. I think it's limiting. And I think sometimes we don't even know what we're about to enter into. So at CCV, we're about to enter into some robotics, some, automation. As you've seen, a lot of our manufacturers are moving to automated. There are large robot arms all over the state, pretty remarkable things. And it isn't that it is taking away jobs, it's changing jobs. And we need people to be ready to program these robots and be able to run them. And that's the kind of thing, you want to be really careful that we aren't limiting what we're saying in there. And I'm not sure why we would. I think we could say an industry recognized credential, a credential of value. The state has an official credential of value definition. And that is also in that paperwork that I can send along to you. But also making sure that it's an industry recognized credential, that the industry says, yes, this is what we want, I think is really important. So I think that language alone, industry recognized credential or credential of value is the important piece here to not limit us. So I'm in agreement with you on that. It's too limiting.
Thank you.
So, yeah, good. Yeah, it doesn't even say not limited to. Yeah, I agree.
So it talks about a Vermont-based training program. That's the preferential place where the money goes. But it says also that you have to be enrolled in a industry recognized training and certification program that leads to employment approved. That's been one of these things. So just what is the world of recipients of these scholarship funds? It seems to me like the major chunk of this $3 million is going to go for tuition payments. And I assume that means payments to any of these recognized training and certification programs, even though they may not view their payments as tuition per se. It's usually associated with Institute of Higher Learning, and they may call it just a fee. So what is the world we're talking about that could get access to this $3 million?
Yeah, I think there are two pieces there. One is the comment there on tuition, which I do see in A. Our initial proposal was that this money would pay for the credential itself. So either the testing of the credential or there can be practice exams, or there's a fee. For instance, I'll give you an example of the certified production technician through the Manufacturing Skills Standards Council. The set of fees that go along with that, if somebody is to walk in the door and say, I want to become a certified production technician, they have 2 courses they have to take. That's what I'm guessing they put this tuition line in there that lead to that credential. There's a candidate fee to the MSSC so that you can sit at all for an exam that you have to pay. Then you have to pay for the e-learnings to study for it, and then you have to pay to sit to take the exam. So I'm imagining that language was in there for things like that, that make it so there is a package of things that have to be put together for people to be able to sit for those exams. In some cases, we have a credential. It's an employment services credential for people, mostly who work at Voc Rehab and places like that, to help people with disabilities and other barriers become employed. That credential is actually a course. It's just the course itself, and it's embedded in the course. So there isn't a separate exam. In other cases, it's just an exam. So it might be the substance abuse exam that we have through the Florida Certification Board. So it's a pretty wide ecosystem of how these things are attained, and then who might be sitting for them. I'm really happy with the language in here about initial employment or career advancement. There are many people already working in Vermont who need an upskilling into a new position or a better paid position or a more solid position. And so I think career advancement is important there. So I think there's the wide ecosystem of the exams themselves and how you attain them, but also the wide ecosystem of the people. Young people coming up and into these careers. This is again why robotics is important to us. We want people to see manufacturing as a really cool and interesting and solid and well-paying career choice. So we need things that are that are fun and neat for them to do. So certifications in robotics will be important there. We have certifications in cloud and UX UI design for people to be looking at those kind of future jobs. And a lot of them could be working remotely. But there's also pharmacy technicians, and it's just such a wide ecosystem where certification can help both the employer and the potential employee or current employee to either upskill or just have that skill set they need to be successful.
So Tiffany, I think I must have read or assumed this wrong. I thought the vast majority of this funding would be for the coursework to get to certification. We're saying it's mostly about fees to take the exam, and so
The cost of the certification.
what about programs like you have at VTC or CCV that lead to sort of certification? They couldn't come and apply for this money to pay for all their classes?
Well, as written, and it's a really good question, it does say tuition payments. And so I'm assuming what the intention is as well here is if they're in a program that leads to an industry credential, that would be eligible. I think that the original idea was the gap of the funding for the licensing fees, the sitting for the credential, the pieces that it costs and take to actually gain the credential. But it does say and tuition payments. So I'm assuming that there is an intent there as well for if people need additional funding and funding on top of what they've gotten, if there's a gap in some way. If they have already financial aid through VSAC, a grant, let's say Pell is paying for all of their tuition, then this would only be used as gap funding for the payment of the credential, which might be over and above what Pell is paying for, I think is the intent here.
Okay, so do you have any feel in terms of the $3 million? This is just off the top of my head. I have no basis for this, but my gut reaction is that $3 million is an awful lot of money just to do the exam fees and stuff like that, but it's not enough money if you're paying for all the coursework.
Yeah, I think because it's considered a gap fund, I think that might be why, is that it's, if people have other funding there, they should only be having these small pieces that need to push them over into either choosing a credentialing program that would allow for the credential or being able to take a credential in a program where they might not have been able to before. So I'm thinking that the 3 million was chosen with that in mind, that it would be gap funding to fill in those pieces where they aren't able to get it. If it is need-based, which it says it is currently, that there would be financial need, then people would have funding through VSAC to pay for other pieces, so that this is something to pay for that extra chunk.
So financial need in your mind is not just the person's income, but you also look at other sources of funding they may be able to access. Okay. Thank you. Do you have other sections in here? I guess we need to hear from VSAC on this, but.
Yeah, that would be good to hear from VSAC on that.
As I recall, there are other sections that VCC are impacted by.
The other piece that that is interesting to me, we'll say, is the sections on nursing. So there's, nursing is mentioned kind of throughout, but I think it's important as, Joyce has also come in and talked about this as well during the development of this bill, that CCV is a really important pipeline into nursing. At any given time, in any given program, our students can be 50 to 80% of the class of nurses that they have started at CCV and taken their, needed pieces. Our allied health prep program is a vital program to feed all of the nursing programs. And throughout the sections, they talk specifically about funding the nursing schools. So I just want to be careful that we are making sure that those people who are coming in through community college and want to become nurses have access to funding in order to do so, as they are likely the people with most need. They started at community college. And so I just wanted to point out that CCV doesn't seem to be present in a lot of that language. And I don't know if there are ways to be sure that those pipeline and feeder programs, or even just specifically mentioning community college, might be a way to help deal with that in those sections about nursing.
So when Charlie Kimball presented this yesterday, he spoke about the 7 nursing programs in Vermont, and we all assume, because we know that a huge percent of our nurses start in the CCV program. So I assume that of the 7 nursing programs he's talking about, CCV is one of them.
Yeah, and I don't know if the assumption is good enough for, the language, only because it specifically says to Vermont's nursing schools.
Do you have a section? And
yeah, I do. So I'm looking right now at section 20, emergency grants to support nurse faculty and staff. There's
hold on. Just wait. We're getting there. Okay. Yep.
Did you raise this issue with the House? And they chose not to put.
I'm not sure. This has morphed so many times. I was looking through the 100 and something page strike through document of trying to see how the changes and when. But Joyce and I both were in the House, and Joyce very, poignantly made the point that that CCV is such an important feeder here. And I think this is true throughout. There were pieces as well where the Vermont State University was mentioned, and knowing that CCV is staying as its own entity under the Vermont State Colleges, we asked that Vermont State Colleges be mentioned instead of Vermont State University. So there were pieces like that as we went along, and as it has morphed. And so being sure that we're mindful that if we want to mention VSU, we have to also mention CCV, or just mention Vermont State Colleges, which will make it easier for us because we're all still going to be part of the Vermont State College, but won't be.
In that first section of section 20, it actually just says Vermont's nursing schools.
Yeah.
So, if we want to then generally refer to Vermont nursing schools later, we need to call them out maybe.
Right. Yep. And I think it's even fair to say, and community college. I mean, I think community college is a preparatory piece. Our allied health prep program is made for that purpose, but we certainly would not be considered a nursing school. We don't have a nursing program. We are just, 80% of those kids sitting over at VTC came from us. So.
We include you that we're diluting the money for, I guess, the more traditional nursing schools, and your programs, your allied health programs or whatever, don't necessarily lead to a nursing degree or even a nursing profession, right? It's the first sort of stage of general coursework and things like that. So I'm just wondering if the House made a conscious decision that, I don't know, we could it potentially lead to somebody at UVM who takes some medical and science courses as an undergraduate to say, I'm entitled to this because I may be a nurse someday.
I think what Tiffany just said was that 50 to 80% of our nurses in Vermont right now is this what we heard you say?
Yeah, so in the programs around the state, it can be at any time 50 to 80% of those students in those programs started. So Allied Health Prep is a specific program built for becoming a nurse. So that program was originally built to help people go into the nursing programs at Castleton and VTC so that there was a kind of seamless approach. And then it became used. So when I started at CCV now 16 years ago, it was my work was preparing nurses. And those students went off to all different schools. They go to Dartmouth and UVM and Castleton and VTC. And so I know that in the VTC programs, it can be 80% of those students sitting there started at CCV. And so that's really just the point that I'm hoping to make, is that the importance of the feeder programs into those programs. Yeah, there isn't any guarantee that anybody who starts a nursing program will become a nurse either. But the people who start in allied health prep, its whole point is to become a nurse. That's its purpose, as opposed to our other certificate programs, which are in medical assisting, in pharmacy tech. They're specific, medical billing and coding. But allied health prep is our program to prepare people for nurses.
So, okay, so that's very helpful. So, but you don't know whether this debate took place in the House, whether you were in or out or?
No, it didn't. It wasn't, not that we weren't called in to talk about that specifically at any point. No, it was just, I'm thinking it might just be an oversight, but I don't know. I don't know what the.
I'm sure it was, because Charlie specifically talked about it included yesterday. So, because I asked about what were the nursing schools and how many programs we had, and there were 7, if that stuck in our minds, but the 7 included CCV.
Anything else you'd like to share with us this morning?
I don't think so. I'm just really thankful to see apprenticeship and earn and learn, and thinking about apprenticeship in a wide way. We've been working really hard at the colleges to widen apprenticeship beyond the trades. The apprenticeships in the trades are vital to us. Plumbing and electrical, don't we all want more plumbers and electricians in Vermont? But we have been expanding those apprenticeships beyond the trades. So just keeping in mind, as we think about these earn and learn programs and how vital they are to Vermonters, they need to be able to work and learn at the same time. And if they can do it in the field that they hope to be in, even better. So we are working really hard on those expansions beyond the trades. And so I think keeping those things in mind in those kind of earn and learn sections, and the vital role the colleges play in apprenticeship and earn and learn programs. I know there's a lot here with CTE, and I think CTE is vital in the process too. But certainly the Vermont State Colleges are working very hard in those areas. So I just appreciate this bill in general and the work that you're all doing on it. So thank you so much.
Tiffany, would you mind sending us a short letter on the points you made this morning?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's lovely to meet you.
You as well. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Give Joyce a big hello.
I will. Thanks.
Great.
So we have Sarah Buxton coming in at 10. We have Chris Cochran here, so we'll talk to Chris and then we can take a break probably until 10 o'clock. So good morning, Chris.
Morning. Sorry for my informality.
Okay.
It's okay. You're luckily on Zoom, so we can't see the rest of you.
So I don't know if you were able to listen in on the presentation we received from Senator Perchlik.
No, I did. I missed that.
I summarize it. You've seen his amendment, right?
Yes.
So we've heard from Gus Seeley at BHCB, and they have no problem with
Right.
first, I guess, whatever it is, first or second, dealing with the collaborative effort. But we wanted to hear from you because we know you and stakeholders brought us this language, and I think the language on bylaw modernization, I don't know if it's changed from the bill we passed last year.
Right.
Certainly it hasn't changed since we introduced this bill to the beginning of the session, but this is an added factor.
Yeah. No, I got an email from Senator Perchlik last night. You know, he said, "Hey, can you look this over and let me know if you support it by 9 a.m. tomorrow?" And I said, you know, there's a lot of people who are vested in this process, and we've taken zero testimony on this. I said, I'd really like to check in with them and see if they support or have concerns about these changes you're proposing. And I committed to him. I said, look, I'd like that time, and I will commit to working with you on this in the House. I think I understand what you want. I probably share some of the same goals and interests you have, and then offered to meet with him next week to talk about it further. His first amendment, I don't have any concerns about. This is to just kind of dial in the language on the neighborhood partnership. I think we all know that kind of came in late, and we had intended to make amendments to that in the House anyway. So that's no concern. I don't know what the implications of his second instance of amendment to add basically energy plan implementation requirements to the bylaw modernization grants. They may be fine. It's just a complicated universe, and I just don't know what the implications are. And I don't know if that.
Who would you think might have some concerns among the stakeholders that you?
I think the municipal planners, the regional planning commissions, maybe VLCT. I mean, it may be fine. I just.
So you've implemented the bylaw modernization with these 9 factors. Could you explain whether they're criteria to get the grant, or it's an expectation that if you give them the grant, that they're going to work on all of these areas?
It is written as an expectation. You have to do all these things. If you don't do all these things, you lose your match. We don't make the final payment.
Do all of these, I guess I'm trying to understand, do all of these things somehow tie into housing? And does this environmental thing help with housing? Or is this just, we're going to give you this because you're a good citizen and we need modern laws?
Well,
The bylaw modernization was
it absolutely could help housing, but it also could hurt housing too. In the past, we've had requests to ensure that any incentive or investment made in designated centers come with higher than average, higher than normal energy efficiency requirements. And this makes it more expensive to develop in the centers. I would like, if that's the goal, and I think we should have higher energy requirements, but I just don't want to make it more expensive to develop and invest in centers than everywhere else in the state. That creates a perverse disincentive. If you want to increase energy requirements, increase them everywhere across the state, not just in certain areas, not just cherry picking downtowns and village centers. And then the other kind of argument, I think I shared the article with you. The provisions in your bill that increase density actually do more for reduce greenhouse emissions than any provisions to add insulation to buildings or improve their energy performance. Because transportation is our biggest energy cost. It's not weatherization.
right, but this, as Senator Perchlik described this to us, this would only apply to towns that have established energy plans. Are there situations that you're aware of where they establish an energy plan but choose not to follow it?
Plans are, happen all the time that aren't followed. I just don't know. That's kind of like, I wish I had time to dig into this, but this really came at the last minute. And I'm committed to exploring this, but I'd like to just understand what this means. And if this is a good thing, I'll absolutely get behind it. If there's a lot of questions about it, I'll work to figure them out. But without any testimony or opportunity to talk with other people who know more about this in the local level than I do, I just have questions.
I would just wonder if a town is trying to do something, it finds it too difficult, it can simply repeal its municipal energy plan. Or does this really have a lot of substance? It's up to the town to decide whether or not to have a municipal energy plan.
Well, except that they wouldn't get the grant if they're not making.
If the municipal energy plan was eliminated, repealed prior to the application of the grant, they don't have a municipal energy plan to comply with. I mean, that's easy way to circumvent, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, but I think the whole point of this, because I think this is a no-brainer, quite honestly. I think this is, if a town has already adopted a municipal energy plan, part of what they're doing to modernize their bylaws, and we're giving them money to help finish that process, if they've adopted it, they'll hopefully include it in their bylaw modernization. So for me, this is reflective of something the town, an action the town has already taken. And it just is a call out, which we should all be doing with the climate action plan and with our efforts to reduce our greenhouse gases, to support the work the town's already done and include it in a modernization plan.
It may be a no-brainer, but there's often tensions between energy policy and land use policy that may play out here. I just don't know. And
Yeah, no, we have. So your preference is to have this conversation in the House and
yeah, I
have
want
it more in depth.
to just have a conversation with Senator Perchlik and bring in some experts to say, look, I want to make this work. I just don't know if the language that's proposed gets to his goal, is beneficial or harmful. And there's been no time to do that work.
Are the 9 criteria in some way geared towards producing more housing or benefiting housing, or are there other things in the 9 criteria that are sort of, more global goals of the state of Vermont that we're throwing in here? So if you want our money, you have to be good.
Yeah, I mean, there were specific goals about, increasing the density. Essentially, the goals were aligning, helping communities meet the requirements of the NDA program, so they could qualify for that. More general goals were the changes that we supported, that BHC wanted, that town, the changes needed to comport with, the affordability requirements in the housing chapter. That all makes sense. But those are more general, less specific.
I'm sorry, let me just get to the section.
Do you want it right here? There's the whole section. There's where it begins.
I'd be more inclined to say, let's do it if we're doing it in other areas, we're just trying to.
Yeah.
But wastewater is related to housing, housing is related to housing, parking waiver is related to housing, modifying street standards is related to housing, reduce non-conformity, making allowance of principal conformity to existing settlement, that's housing, restrict development or minimize impact to important natural resources, including new development. So that is, I don't know if 6 is related to housing. That could be another environmental thing that would dictate that Andy's right.
What is 6?
Restrict development of and minimize impact to important natural resources, including new development in floodplain, flood hazard areas, undeveloped floodplains, and river corridor, unless lawfully allowed for infill development. So that's sort of analogous to what he's saying, protect the environment in your bylaw modernization.
Well, this is more, we're trying to ensure that housing gets located in locations that support our environmental goals. Yes. But this is, again, if you look through the lit checklist here and you look through the checklist for the neighborhood development area designation, they're the same. There's no right now requirement for implementation of a local energy plan as a requirement for NDA designation. So
that was an oversight on our part.
Well, so I mean, I'm looking at this, really, every one of these is pretty much geared towards promoting housing in the bylaws, for smart growth housing. I think this is what he's suggesting, while laudable, is not necessarily in line. I mean, it could, you could put in here saying something about you have to increase there's a lot of policies that we have in Vermont that are not related to this bill that we would want the bylaws to follow. But I always view this bylaw modernization section is to be in sync with helping to promote denser, smarter growth.
Right, but Mr. Chair, if I may, we all also have to be cognizant of now that we have adopted the climate action plan. If we also, all housing and transportation are our 2 biggest emitters of greenhouse gases. I think to go to Andy's point, and so this conversation makes me wonder, I assume most of BHCB's guidelines now include only building energy efficient housing. I mean, I can't imagine anyone now not building energy efficient housing.
Nope.
This is
VHB
No, I
has
know,
higher
but
energy.
but this goes to the encouragement in the town energy plans of, I agree that it's slightly different, but the town energy plan may have a lot to do in there with housing. So I think it would probably benefit from a fuller conversation in the House, and we'll just stay tuned and I hope that you will keep us updated on that, because I would right now include this. I would tend to include it.
So Chris, practically speaking, if this was included and when these grants start coming in, what would you tell the applicants that?
Well, I need to know what it does first, and I haven't had time to study that, so I can't answer that question just yet. I mean, it may be a compromise. I mean, again, I committed to Senator Perchlik to work with him on this. We have reasonably good relationships.
We have to make a decision because he's rejected that. He wants
Okay.
he wants to go forward with the amendment. So
If he wants to go forward with the amendment, then I guess that ensures that I do follow through. But I don't know what this is going to mean, and he needs to recognize that this language was not vetted and is very likely going to change.
Right. And I appreciate that. And I think that we can say that on the floor, which is that the department is committed to carrying on this conversation in the House.
Well, the place to bring this is in the House. You know, we shouldn't be passing things that we haven't vetted, we've taken no testimony on, we don't understand whether or not there are unintended consequences that could result from this. The fact that we're interested in it, the fact that it looks good on the surface, without testimony, I think it would be irresponsible for us to add this at this late date before third reading. There's ample time for them to bring this in the House and deal with it there, not here.
You know, I go back and forth this. I understand the theory and the principle behind what you're saying, but it seems pretty straightforward. But then again, there could be a reason why a town has not put in their bylaw the energy plan. So whether we don't want that particular town to get a grant, I guess that does beg the question of whether we should have some further testimony.
So I would suggest at this point, as much as I would like to include this, I would defer to Chris and charge Chris with making sure they have this conversation.
Yeah, no.
And Andy also, but and members of our Climate Solution Caucus. Make sure we have this conversation in the House. And yeah, I think at this point, just in this brief conversation, we've identified the need to chat with the planners and other people that are impacted.
And
But
absolutely, I don't need language to commit to something. My words were something, and I will follow through.
I've seen you all the time and asking you, how are we doing?
Okay, so Senator Rob, do you have any thoughts? I'm just going to assume that the three of us here,
We're okay with one.
we're okay with one. I'll say we'd like to defer the conversations.
And that the administration's committed to working on,
Okay, I don't know if Senator Rob's around, but that's the position I'll take on the floor.
Well, I hope it goes well today. Hope there are not too many bumps. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll take 10 minutes
We're gonna
break.
give you a crook for shepherding.